Dinosaurs are typically imagined as living in a warm climate, like the Jurassic Park movies would have you believe. But a new discovery suggests that at least some dinosaurs lived in the literal opposite of Jurassic Park's humid jungles. A recent study describes some of the first direct evidence of dinosaurs living in the Arctic Circle, complete with evidence that they used burrows to survive the harsh conditions. This discovery gives us an idea of how dinosaurs adapted to cold climates, which can help us better understand not just them, but also the animals we share the planet with today. So what do we know about these polar dinosaurs? And how were they able to survive in such harsh environments? Let's dig into it. The most surprising part of this new study is that it found some of the first physical evidence for dinosaurs living in the Arctic Circle. The researchers discovered dinosaur bones, coprolites or fossilized poop, and even dino-shaped burrows, all in a relatively small area on Ellesmere Island in Canada's Arctic territory of Nunavut. The site is called the Isachsen Formation, located around 80 degrees north latitude. For reference, that's even farther north than the northernmost point in Alaska. But before we get too excited about plucky little dinosaurs hanging out in the snow, let's be clear. By Arctic Circle, we mean the region roughly from 66.5 degrees north to the North Pole. That makes it pretty chilly. And yet, the fossils in the area suggest that this wasn't just a barren wasteland. For one thing, the team reports that the rocks at the site are full of fossils, not just from dinosaurs, but also from marine creatures. And many of those marine fossils are of species that are only found in shallow, warm water. These fossils include coral, sea scorpions, mollusks, fish, turtles, and even a type of whale ancestor. They thrived here between around 125 and 105 million years ago, during the peak of the Cretaceous period, meaning that the Arctic Circle was much warmer back then than it is now. But it was still pretty cold, and it turns out that some dinosaurs managed to make this environment their home. Based on the bones found at the site, the team could tell that the dinosaurs were Ornithomimids, plant-eating dinosaurs with long necks and three-toed hands and feet, kind of like a baby sauropod with tiny arms. The thing that really stood out about the site, though, was the number of burrows the researchers found. In total, they found 19 nests and hundreds of tracks from Ornithomimids. The nests had eggs laid in a mound shape, which isn't something any other dinosaur laid their eggs like. In fact, this type of nesting has only been seen once before, and that was in the genus Boreopelta, Mark Mitchellii, another ornithomimid that lived in the same general area and time period, though it was a bit more southerly. It looks like the dinosaurs chose their nest sites carefully. According to the study, the majority of the nests are near the edges of ancient lakes, close to where the land meets the water. Nests were often built under shrubs or clumps of vegetation, and the eggs were buried in a layer of mud, maybe as a way of insulating them. All this shows that these dinosaurs put a lot of effort into reproducing in what was probably a pretty miserable place to live. Based on the evidence that other animals lived there, though, it seems like the Arctic Circle wasn't all that bad back then. With a little ingenuity, it was possible to build a decent life there. That is, if you brought your A game when it came to keeping warm. Birds today exhibit a wide range of adaptations to deal with cold weather. Some stay active only when it's warmest outside, like during the day. Others shiver to generate extra heat. Many birds fluff up their feathers to trap air close to their bodies, and some even huddle together for warmth. Well, ornithomimids didn't have feathers, but they may have done something similar by curling up next to each other in groups to keep warm. There's evidence of this behavior in the fossil record. The researchers point to a passage in a 1976 paper describing two skeletons of Boreopelta that were found together. The skeletons were described as being curled up in such a way that their snouts touched while their tails were wrapped around each other. It's hard to say whether these two dinos were lovers or just friends, but it's clear that dinosaur snuggling is exactly what you need to survive in the cold. Now, the new study doesn't actually have any direct evidence of dinosaurs using burrows to keep warm, but the team does say that it's hard to imagine that the dinosaurs would have survived without the burrows. That's because the trackways show that the ornithomimids were active throughout the year, even in the middle of winter. In fact, The tracks indicate that the dinosaurs were still moving around after the lakes froze over, so they must have found some way to survive the winter chill. The tracks also show that even though the Arctic Circle gets less than 3 hours of sunlight a day in the winter, the ornithomimids were still getting out and about. To be fair, this is still nowhere near enough sunlight to keep the environment warm, especially considering that sunlight is the main way heat gets into the Arctic Circle. This means that these dinosaurs were true Arctic animals. They didn't just hang out in the Arctic Circle seasonally. They lived there year-round. All this tells us that dinosaurs had some amazing adaptations for dealing with the cold, but it also tells us something about how Earth's poles used to work. Back when the ornithomimids lived, the poles weren't nearly as cold as they are today. They were covered in plant and animal life, which helped keep them warm. Today, the only plants that grow in the Arctic Circle are small things like mosses and lichens, and animals generally stay away. This means that the ecosystem at the poles has changed drastically since the dinosaurs' day. If global temperatures continue to rise, we might see the Arctic Circle become a little bit more like its Cretaceous counterpart, full of life, instead of just ice. But there's one thing we won't be seeing anytime soon. No matter how warm it gets, adorable, penguin-like dinosaurs. Despite what the title of this video says, the Arctic Circle was hardly a walk in the park. These animals faced shortages of food and sunlight for most of the year, but thanks to a combination of great adaptations and a warmer climate, they made it work. Today, only a handful of species live in the Arctic Circle. Maybe that's why we think of it as a frozen wasteland, but it hasn't always been that way. And who knows? Maybe one day it will be teeming with life once again. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you learned something new about dinosaurs. If you want to learn more about dinosaurs, check out the link below. Thanks for watching.